Hi, and welcome to the Soul and Survival podcast with Grant and Louise Bentley. We have run the Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy since 1995. We are both qualified practicing homeopaths, and Grant is also a naturopath. Together, we discovered a link between energy and facial structure based on traditional ideas from homeopathy that have roots going back 200 years. This project is called Homeopathic Facial Analysis, or HFA for short, and has been the cornerstone of clinical diagnosis and training courses since 1999. Between us, we have written and produced 7 HFA books, including Soul and Survival. Soul and Survival is the philosophy of energy influencing matter and how this energy forms individual facial structure, our unconscious drives and fears, our life patterns, and universal time cycles.
Hi everybody, and welcome to what is hopefully a glitch-free episode of Soul and Survival. And the last one seemed to work okay, the part 2. So let's continue. So hello to you, Louise.
Oh, hi Grant, how are you?
Good. What are we doing?
Well, I like to bounce off something we were talking about, and you put on a really interesting program. You often do that on a day off, just after breakfast. You like to put something, a thinking piece on, and we often have some really interesting conversations from these shows. And the show you chose this morning was about Jung and the shadow. I don't know who the presenter was. It was someone who did a pretty nice job of explaining things in a simple way. And at one point, you spoke about how homeopathy is the pathway to resolution, whereas psychotherapy is the kernel of the problem. And that just seemed a really interesting way of looking at it. Do you want to take that a little bit further?
When you're going into Jung's shadow, you're going into a deep dive. When you go into Jung full stop, you're going into a deep dive. There have been some thinkers throughout time that are just in a league of their own. Hahnemann was one. Nothing of what we do in homeopathy would exist if it wasn't for Hahnemann. So Hahnemann was just in a league of his own. And to some degree, I think Jung is in a league of his own too. I'm not claiming in any way, shape to be an expert in Jung. I'm not. But the only reason that I said what I said, and you'll have to quote it again because I don't remember. It was just an off-the-cuff thing. But the thing that
do you want me to quote it now? Or?
Well, no.
Not yet.
Yeah, no, go on.
Homeopathy is the pathway to resolution. Psychotherapy is the kernel of the problem.
Okay, so psychotherapy as in Jungian psychotherapy, because we were talking, the whole program was about the shadow. The shadow is just those parts of ourselves that we either suppress or repress, and then essentially because they don't give us the pat on the head that we're looking for. In fact, in some ways, they give us exactly the opposite. So what Jung is talking about is that we come into this life with our own particular personality. We need, because we're totally defenseless, we need the good approval of the adults around us, particularly our parents. Another thing that Jung spends a lot of time on. In fact, he says, one of the biggest problems the individual faces is the unlived life of the parent, because they have a tendency to project, right? And patterns repeat. Circles become unbroken rather than broken. But so now what you have is that you have let's just say a young girl. A young girl comes in and she's really happy and she's boisterous and she's loud and she's laughing and all that. And now, but the mum is stern for whatever reason. They might be suffering migraines for all I know. I have absolutely no idea. But the point is that they don't like that kind of noise. So You get told as that young girl to shut up or to do something else or to go away or that's annoying. So the first thing that jubilant young girl learns is that happiness isn't necessarily a good thing to have. In fact, it can get you into trouble. So remember, because we're not dealing with an adult mind here, right? So we're dealing with a mind where all the doors and windows of the subconscious are absolutely open. So anything that is being said about your personality and your behaviour, you're just going to take on it as the truth.
So is this always for all children? This
Yeah.
is pretty much the process. Coming into the world,
Yeah.
you look around, you assess what's going on, and then your subconscious starts to create its own way of looking at the world.
Yeah, you present yourself and parents either accept that, of which case you continue to go, or you are not accepted with that, in which case you begin to modify. And that modification means putting some aspects away and presenting more palatable aspects. But palatable to who? Palatable to parents, and then later on into your social network and so on. So it's the ego is essentially the presentation that you develop to show other people all the good qualities that you have that you think they are going to be interested in. Whether that's success or whether or not that's, who knows? It could be 1,000 different things. But the shadow is essentially that basic part of your personality that was not as socially accepted. So now what you're going to do is you're not going to give it the same energy. You're not going to let it out of the cupboard to show itself.
But it's still a natural part of who you are.
It's still a natural part of who you are. And there's another great quote about how if you suppress it for too long, it's because it's in the subconscious now, or what Jung calls the unconscious, but we have a slightly different version as we've spoken about, because I do think that there's a third layer that you inherit from nature that Jung doesn't take into account. But that subconscious that he's talking about is at a level that is almost physical. You don't consciously tell your heart to beat or your stomach to digest. And so it affects your health because it's at that same level. But it's not a positive message, it's a repressed message. And one of the things that homeopathy is very, very big on is suppression. That suppression is a major cause of illness, which is true. But sometimes it doesn't have to be just that. Sometimes it's an energy drain wherever that energy drain may occur. And that's not always suppression. So I guess the reason that I said what I said is because there are aspects of particularly contemporary homeopathy where I can see, because I have a grad dip in psychotherapy, so it's not new to me, this. But I can see where there are strains of homeopathy that are desperately trying to incorporate psychotherapy into the way that a homeopathic consultation should be done, and even how the remedy should be chosen. Now I'm going to start to take I start to knit my brow a little bit here, because you are dealing with two different issues. Psychotherapy and homeopathy are not the same road.
And so this is your path. Homeopathy is the pathway to resolution, but psychotherapy is just the kernel of the problem.
Yeah. So what psychotherapy is doing is, if you have the whole thing about the shadow, just going back to that, is that Yes, it's a darker, more unrewarded side of you. And when I say darker, I mean that it's probably the wrong word, really.
Maybe you've made it dark, or society or your family's sort of helped you to see it that way,
Yeah,
you think?
I think so. It's seen as a darker or a less golden attribute
Well,
that
even
you
the word
have.
shadow implies there's no sunlight. It's got there's a gloom over it.
Well, I think what he means to say though is that it's, when you go for a walk outside, the shadow's always there. Right, there, it's your accompaniment, even though you don't know it, and it's not the public presentation. That whole sort of geisha thing, why they do their makeup the way that they do, is so you can't see the inner emotion. You just see the outer presentation. And that's what he means, is that outer presentation is formulated and refined, and it's workshopped all the way through our lives till we think that that's all there is, and it isn't. That shadow is ever present, even though you don't think it's impacting, it is. There's a great quote that he does about fate too, and I'm not going to go through it because I don't know it well enough to quote it verbatim, and it's so darn wonderful it needs to be quoted verbatim. But it's essentially that if you don't pay the shadow some dues, it's going to influence your life via the events that you do in your life, the circumstances you create, the people you choose, and you're going to call it fate. But it isn't. It's the shadow influence. So when I say dark, it doesn't have to be dark, because that happy girl wasn't doing dark things. But because it was not conducive to the parent that she had, or at least the most vocal parent, she has learned to suppress that a little bit and to then try and win that mother over via other means other than her personality. Right.
Yep, I see what you mean.
Right. And so a person like that can become a workaholic, for example. Right, because now what you do is that you end up getting the pat on the head that you wanted for just laughing and being nice and being yourself, which you didn't get, but you might get accolades for coming back because you got all A's in your school report, or you built something, that everybody is applauding, including that main person that you desperately want to impress. So now what you become is this joyless workaholic that's got, houses all over the world and drives expensive cars, but you're not particularly happy because you're on your fourth marriage and your kids won't talk to you. And essentially every time you talk to them, it's because they tell you that you're really boring and that you're no fun at all.
Which is pretty ironic. So when someone like that comes into the clinic, and they're not well, and, they're feeling down, maybe depressed, maybe anxious, maybe their body's starting to play up, how does that story play into how you do the consultation?
Though I wish I had prepared, at least prepared Jung's quote.
We'll get it next time. That's okay.
It's something about influencing the circumstances of life, and you'll be calling it fate. But he's telling you it isn't fate. It's your own projection. It's your own projection that's causing this. So, where were we going? What was the question?
Well, I'm. You've given this lady who's now the hard worker, and she's got all the assets and so forth, but even her own children don't find her all that much fun. She comes into the clinic, she's got problems, How does her story play into your clinical analysis?
Oh, okay. So that's why I went to the circumstances that you will cause fate. So the one thing is that there will be a repeating pattern somewhere in that life force, right? So that repeating pattern could just be like we gave a completely made-up example, but that she was on her fourth marriage and the kids won't talk to her and so on. She's very successful, but, you know, her emotional life is a complete bloody disaster. And that will be because that inability to be able to express or even perceive, because you end up with an aversion, because I can't say the word.
Yeah.
Antipathy is what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Towards the very things that you're suppressing. So this woman, for example, will be a no shit sort of hard nose to the grindstone sort of person that won't put up with any fun whatsoever or any of that kind of mischief around her, because time is precious and she doesn't have time for it. So what you suppress is what you hate in others, is what he's saying.
So would that come up in your clinical conversation?
Well, what will come up, I will just take the obvious, right? Mm-hmm. Now this is where I'm going to differ.
This is your pathway to resolution.
No, this is even to just understanding the problem.
Okay.
But I don't have to share this problem, share my solution with her, by the way. Mm-hmm. Right? This is for me to understand. So when I sit down and I listen to her case and I listen to the fact that she hasn't got many friends and she's on her fourth marriage and her kids won't talk to her, well, I don't go any further than that. Now, this is where I'm different to some of these other practitioners that feel, well, but how does that feel? How does that feel? And go into it, because what they're looking for is a sensation emanating the body. So they're looking for a single point of reference, right? So you go deeper, 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 deeper. But I'm telling you, you don't need to go deeper than that, because you already have the rubric that you want. And it's either estranged or forsaken. Mm-hmm. Right? And how do you know that that's as deep as what it goes? Well, because that's the circumstances, that's the event. You know, when Jung was saying, you'll call it your shadow, your suppressed self is going to express itself or make itself known through a series of events that you're going to call fate. And in homeopathic or HFA terms, they're called life themes.
Mm-hmm. And
right? You
would just pick one rubric to represent that theme, and that's enough.
Yeah, that's enough, because now I have a cause, right? But now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go back to basic homeopathy, and I'm going to try and get as many modalities as what I can, because in that thing that you've got written down that supposedly I said this morning that I can't remember, but I said something about that psychotherapy is trying to find the kernel of the problem, where homeopathy is trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? So what you do is that stressor, which we've summarised under the rubric of forsaken, so we've included it. I'm not saying not to include it. Mm-hmm. But now what I need is, how's your body dealing with it? Right? So now I'm just back to the basic, the genius that preceded Jung in Hahnemann, and go into all of the modalities and the sensations, just basic homeopathy, because what that's telling you is that it's telling you the pathway that it's taking to try and get some stress relief that this estrangement or forsakenness is creating. Mm-hmm. So there's no need to keep going down, 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 down until you see the repeating pattern of a sensation. There's no need. You're wasting time. You've already got its expression in the repeating life theme. You don't need to do
So
anymore.
you've got one rubric, and the rest you're going to pick up from the body.
Yeah, that's right. Well, what I'm going to pick up from the body, the circumstances, the repeating pattern's going to tell me what the stress is. Mm-hmm. And what the body is going to do is that the body's going to tell me the pathway that I need to double up on in which to reach some sort of harmony.
Which is your pathway to resolution, meaning the body's doing its very best, but it needs some support, it needs some help. And you're going to take those problems, those symptoms, and you're going to double up on them to give the body an extra oomph, but it's also going to link in with that psychotherapeutic part of the patient.
Yeah, yeah. But you don't even, and this is the thing, you don't even need this postgrad in psychotherapy. I don't need to fully understand that. All I need to do is just, and then what happened? And then what? So you're just getting a biography. The circumstances are going to scream what the problem is, right? Now, and there I might highlight that, I might ask a question. Are you lonely or are you okay with this? It seems like being left out or being left behind seems to be a continuing pattern for you. And
is that just to show empathy that you're speaking to the patient?
To show understanding.
Yeah, understanding.
I get your
empathy.
story.
Yeah.
I get your story and I get your stress. I understand what it is that you're telling me.
And that's not about choosing the remedy. That's about letting the patient know that you're understanding what's going on, and therefore you have some expectation of what could happen for them.
Yeah, I think if you're going to any kind of practitioner, it's important for you as the patient to know that the practitioner gets it.
Yeah, I mean we could probably do a whole few sessions on what a practitioner needs to be in themselves to be a good practitioner, because it's a type of behaviour, isn't it, that really is important to patients.
Yeah, you don't. I'm gonna say what you don't need to be first.
Yeah,
you don't need to be all nurturing. Mm-hmm. Right. In fact, that can get you into trouble. And I think in modern times, the nurturer has risen from an important role to the most important role. Mm-hmm. Nurturing the environment, nurturing people, nurturing the disadvantaged, all honourable and valuable things. And as a society, and as what we call an advanced society, we need those things. So I'm not running them down, but they're not numbers 1, 2 or 3, right? Our job, our only job, is to find a remedy. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Because that is the pathway to their resolution, which is such a nice phrase.
Yeah.
The more I say it, and I've said it about 5
You don't need
times.
that woman doesn't need the pat on the head from me. She needs it from her mother. She just doesn't know that yet.
And she won't probably get it now, but now maybe she might be able to be a little bit more relaxed, and her children can start to see her in a slightly different light.
The mother can be replaced by other family figures, like a new partner, or perhaps one of the children softening a little bit, because they'll be approaching her, and the problem is that in this make-believe scenario, we all have these, and again, the going back to Jung, the shadow can be a little bit of a salivating Rottweiler growling at you. You might want a pat, but the way you're behaving is not making people want to pat you. And that's a real problem.
Because you're in protective mode.
Yeah, you're in, and so if you go into that state of fight or flight, like what we've pointed out many times in the past, if you're in a state of fight or flight for a long period of time, step 2 is becoming a patient, because it's inevitable. You're just using up too much energy.
Yeah.
And it's not constructive energy. You only get energy from a few sources. Remedy is one of them. Nutritious food is one. Happiness is one. and sleep is one, right? And they are your your three. I mean, your four. Yeah, the remedy is because you haven't got the other three right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're starting to get some sort of chronic illness, you do need to have a look at your life and what got you here. Now, some people won't. They're just not interested in changing their life that much. So now as a practitioner, you need to, I guess, alter your prognosis, right? Meaning that your expectation of what can be achieved. Because some people can't change their environment and some people don't want it. They're too set.
I'm thinking of a case, you'll remember this case, and if anyone wants to do the course, it's a case that's included, so I'm not going to overdo the case, but I just wanted to give an example. This case was one we did in student clinic many years ago now. It was a really lovely lady in her late 60s, and she came in for really bad headaches. She knew nothing about homeopathy, and she had you would always do the story. We probably focused even more on the story then, but her story was one where there'd been a problem with a son and his sexuality wasn't accepted by the father, and there was a whole lot of family drama, and then the father had a heart attack and died. This is her husband. And she just went into a really spiral state, and her health really went poorly, and she was depressed and all sorts of things. Anyway, so you did the case really empathetically, and we took the modalities and so on and so forth and did her facial analysis. And we got the face right, so we got the miasm, and you did a nice rep, and you picked a remedy for her, which was just a simple polycrest. And she started taking it once a day, and because it was part of our routine and still is, that we've got to do some follow-up to make sure you're on track. She came back a month later, and she brought in a bunch of roses to say thank you because she felt so much better in only those 4 weeks, and that was really lovely. Anyway, you kept, chatting to her, how's things going? Pretty good. She's feeling better. Her depression had lifted. She was feeling a bit happier. She felt like she, in her head, could resolve some of the difficulties that had happened between her son and her husband. And anyway, so keep going with the remedy. She comes back another month later. I can't remember if it was that second follow-up or possibly the third, but she came with a big smile on her face, and I think it might have been the third one. And her energy had shifted to such a point that she was quite happy.
Did we do this with calc carb?
Yeah, and it was exactly.
Wow, that's a long
time
but
it's okay. We've still got it in the course, and it's a really nice case. But the story is that her energy shifted so much that she was in the supermarket one day when she got chatting to some fella her age, late 60s, early 70s, whatever it was, and about coffee. I remember it was something about coffee. Anyway, she tells the story, and then, he brazenly asked her, could they have a coffee together, and off they went. Anyway, by the next month, they're in this full-blown relationship.
She had a boyfriend.
And she's as happy as can be. And it was so amazing to see this shift in her over these few consultations, all on one daily dose of, calc. That's the case. So if you're doing it as part of the course, you'll know that now. But nonetheless, it's just incredible when you see it unravel like that. And I think one of the things for her, she was quite a simple person. She didn't overcomplicate things. She knew what grief was. She knew why she was grief-stricken. She couldn't really manage her own depression. But that remedy just cut right through. It shifted everything for her to the point that she would never have even... From that first consultation, she wouldn't have even considered that bringing someone else into her life could in any way be a positive thing. It would have sounded like a complication, but it wasn't. It was beautiful. And that was all on a remedy. It was lovely to see. And you do see those things, but I think the more simple people are, the less they complicate their own story. I'm sure that's more helpful.
Well, it's kind of interesting you say that, because the majority of illness, I don't think, is caused from any sort of real intellectual base at all. Mm-hmm. I think the vast majority of people's problems are either energetic as you go older, meaning that you're just pushing too hard, But the by far the biggest is an emotion rather than anything to do with the intellect. Most people's faculties are not their problem. It's their inability to be able to emotionally, evolve with the circumstances of life. Now, whether or
Which
not...
goes right back to that shadow story, because you're saying it starts at the beginning and then it just sort of piles on itself as the years go by.
Yeah, it does. I mean, if you're going to go back to, our make-believe scenario, well, then this woman ends up just surrounding herself with a lot of serious people that will interact with her at work, but are not going to want to be social with her, let alone be romantic and intimate with her. They're not interested because she's just not putting it out. And yet, if you're going to go right back to how the shadow began, it was the need for the hug from somebody important, which is what she craved in the first place. And until that point, it really doesn't matter how many jets you own. If you're not getting the hug, it's kind of meaningless.
You just got to work out what's your hug and how to get it. But there's no doubt that a good remedy allows some form of energetic integration between the mind, the emotions and the body. It's an extraordinary thing when you think about it.
Yeah, well, again, if we just keep it really, really simple, because the simple is the most easy to understand, but it doesn't mean that it's any less accurate. When you're in that fight or flight mode, it's you versus the world. You're not embracing the world, you're fighting the world. You're trying to control it, you're trying to influence it, and the bottom line is that most people's starting place, at least for a shadow, that then causes the events and circumstances that we're going to call fate or life themes, if you want to go down the HFA model. Most of those things are from a really simplistic emotion. And that's that would be the one thing, even after 30 plus years of clinical practice, and writing books, traveling around the world, lecturing at really high levels when it comes to homeopathy, postgrads in psychotherapy. It'll have a simplistic solution. It won't come. It'll be quite childish. Whatever is the main kernel of the problem, it's going to be a childish, immature emotion that just wasn't met.
Isn't it extraordinary?
Yeah. So don't overcomplicate it. Right? That's one of the things that we just do way too much. So when I say that psychotherapy gets you to the kernel of the problem, but homeopathy is the way that you treat it, but that second part's really important, because psychotherapists can only go so far unless you're going to spend year after year after year after year seeing one. And then you can work your way through eventually. But the story that you tell is one where we got somebody out of the fight or flight response really, really quickly. And so now they're open to change. When you're in the fight, we've spoken about this before, right? When you're in fight or flight, the survival instinct is in charge, not your consciousness. It's not your intellect. Your intellect's just an observer, and usually critically observing your own behaviour and not liking it very much. But then you don't know why and how to change, and you just can't do it anyway. You can't stick to it. You can say, I'm not going to get angry, I'm not, and then this one person walks right up to our fictitious woman who, is a bit of a bitch, really. And she's saying to herself, I don't get angry. And it doesn't matter. She'll be, going in and rubbing her temples saying clear blue ocean, clear blue ocean. But it's not the same as not feeling it, trying to use willpower to overcome your emotions or to suppress your emotions, as we've already learned, is going to be not only eventually fruitless, but it's going to tire you completely. But what homeopathy does is that it gets you out of that state. It takes you out of that fight or flight state by giving you the energy you need to switch that fight or flight mechanism off naturally, not through willpower. Right? And that makes a really big difference because, as we've said before, when your survival instinct is in charge, it's going to want to repeat patterns. Doesn't want you to change patterns, wants you to repeat them.
Even the worst ones.
Even the worst ones. Why? Because
It's known.
If we were a horrible person yesterday, if I'm a horrible person again today and tomorrow, then I'm guaranteed survival. Because if I just repeat the same pattern and I survived it, well, then repeating it again means that I'll survive it again. And so while therapy is good, I think it takes such a long time by comparison to a remedy. Not saying it can't achieve it. I'm just saying it's the scenic route home.
Remedy's a fast track if you can get it. And I'm going to plug it again, but HFA with the face and the easy way of repping, it's delightful. Look, there are cases that are harder than that. We don't want to make out like every case is that straightforward because there are environmental issues. There's damage that's done that's really seeped in. There's people on terrible diets, bad lifestyles. There's a lot of things going on in particularly...
And also, too, by the time they reach us, their life force might have ebbed to such a degree. We haven't gone all that much to work with.
No, and yet this particular lady we were speaking of was not a young woman, but nonetheless, but if you can get a remedy that's even getting close to yourself, you can start to get some decent improvements. And even if you only get 50% of the way, that's way better than nothing at all. And sometimes you just learn a little bit about yourself along the way. And if you've got a good practitioner like you, Grant, you do some wonderful work with people, the way you understand them at a very simple level, and you can often give some very nice, straightforward pieces of advice that if they choose to take them can just add to the efficacy of the remedy.
Well, it depends on whether they want it. You always got to go where people want to go. And sometimes, they just give me the remedy, make me feel better. I don't want your psychobabble. Just make me feel good. Well, that's fine. I have to understand the estrangement or the forsakenness and why, and I can understand it. But if you don't want to know what I mean, well, then that's fine too. Whereas you get with some other people and now they do want to know. They want to know every intricacy of what got them to this. And you can, in a lot of cases, find it, actually.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that was glitch-free and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks for listening to Soul and Survival. If you are interested in more information, books, courses, consultations, learning more about facial analysis or life themes, please visit our college site, Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy, vcch.org.